That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay guys, for anybody who is expecting us to make a video today about the James Conner signing in Arizona, I'm sorry, but I don't want to sit here and talk 10 to 15 minutes about James Conner and Chase Edmonds. I just won't do it. We initially put out a tweet saying our initial thoughts on James Conner, as well as we put out a small mini podcast that can be found on Patreon. But to be honest, with it being April right now, with us gearing up for the NFL draft, I just would way rather talk about these rookies that are coming in, talk about what guys we should be looking at in our rookie drafts. And yesterday we went through and we talked about these wide receivers. We talked about Rashad Bateman, Jalen Waddle, Rondale Moore. Now I want to go over to the running backs. And of course, we've already discussed the Travis Etienne, the Najee Harris, the Javonte Williams in exactly what order we would like them. But now I want to dive into that second tier, because if you go over to Patreon and you look at our current running back rankings, there have been a ton of changes so far this season, where I swear every single week I'm having to make an update. Every single week we are having to raise players, lower players, and that's not how it usually is every offseason. I think that obviously this offseason has been just ridiculous with the fact that we didn't have the combine. We didn't have a full 2020 season for a lot of these prospects. So those variables that we're used to looking at, the profiles that are used to being normal, we just simply don't have. So we are continuing to try to spend as much time as we can, especially as we prepare for our rookie draft kit that's going to be available on Patreon. I just need to be diving into these guys more and more. So yeah, let's dive into players that I have ranked significantly lower compared to the wide receivers than most other people that make Dynasty content. And what we are going to be doing here is, let's just go running back by running back. Let's start it off with Kenneth Gainwell. Not saying he's our running back one out of this group. Of course, we'll get to those rankings at the end of the video, but let's give you a quick overview on what we are looking at with Gainwell. Okay, so when we are trying to evaluate these running back prospects, I understand that at the wide receiver position, what we mainly just want is we want age-adjusted production in terms of looking at the context of the offense as well, and trying to look at their market share, trying to look at what they're able to do with other competition in that wide receiver room. Where at the running back position, it's a little bit different. I mean, just look at the draft last year, where our number one player that we were drafting over and over and over again was actually Antonio Gibson. And a lot of people were worried about him because he didn't have the production. And they were just worried that he was a freak athlete that was raw, that wasn't going to be able to translate. And we were sitting here saying, you know what? If he was a wide receiver, yes, that's something you'd have to be worried about, because the wide receiver position, you win it with technique. You win it by creating separation. But no, at the running back position, you win dynasty leagues with traits. And we talk about this all the time. If you watch the videos, I'm sure you know it. But there are going to be 4 traits that we really want to see with these running backs. A, we want to see them coming into the NFL at an extremely young age. We want to see them getting the NFL draft capital to go along with this to indicate that their NFL team is going to be planning to give them opportunity. What we also need to see is we need to see a great athletic profile. Now, if we have a wide receiver coming into the NFL that runs a subpar 40-yard dash, that doesn't have the vertical jump that you would want to see, I mean, to be honest, I don't care too much, because if the production is there, we know that he can win in a different area of the field. So at the running back position, you also want that athletic profile. Now, the other 2 things is you need to see running backs have the capable size, specifically the BMI, that are going to be able to give them 20 to 25 touches a game. You want to have that 3-down potential. Lastly, what you also want to see is you need to see them be a great receiving running back coming out of college. And if they're not going to be a great receiving running back, you can look at a Jonathan Taylor and go, hey, he was an adequate receiving running back coming out of Wisconsin. And if he takes a step up at the NFL, then he can become that above average receiving down running back. So he has potential to be an all-around bell cow. So with Kenneth Gainwell, let's see exactly what boxes he checks here. So coming out of Memphis, he was actually a 3-star prospect going into Memphis. And I know this is a quick side tangent, and some of y'all have heard me say the story before, but last semester, actually, I'm sorry, 2 semesters ago, I was supposed to be going through and doing a research paper for my biostatistics class about RNA strands in different gene expression levels. And instead, I spent the entire semester researching what high school recruit rank meant for these prospects coming into the NFL, and if it meant anything and had any kind of correlation to NFL success. Now, no, surprisingly, I did not get a good grade on this project, but we had some findings. We had some things that we can look at. And surprisingly, at the running back position, you actually see high school recruit rank having a direct correlation to NFL success, where obviously you're not going to be expecting all those 5-star running backs to be able to come in, to be able to be instant impact players. But generally, if you are a 5-star guy, if you're that Najee Harris, if you're that Travis Etienne, going into high school where you're going to that big-time program, I mean, just look at DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, all these guys, you knew their names coming out of high school. Those are the guys that succeed at the NFL level. And very rarely, outside of instances like David Johnson, if I'm remembering correctly, do you have these players that don't really rank highly in the high school recruits at the running back position come out of complete nowhere and vault up to being an elite running back at the NFL level. And I know people are probably going to hear me say that, and they're just going to roll their eyes, think it doesn't matter. But guys, I literally spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours researching this. I promise y'all. The wide receiver position, quick side note, no, it does not matter there at all. Wide receiver position, there's no correlation between high school recruit rank and actual NFL success. But anyway, with Gainwell, we want to point out that he's a 3-star prospect. And of course, you can't stop there. You have to paint the overall profile. He is 22 years old, coming out of Memphis as well. That's not something you want to see. You want to see these running backs coming out at 21. And I know a lot of people are going to be talking about him being undersized. And yes, he is short. Yes, he doesn't weigh a lot. But, I mean, he is 5'8", 201 pounds. So that BMI puts him in the 60th percentile. So you don't have to be too worried about the size because, no, you're not going to be expecting him to be a running back like Ezekiel Elliott, seeing over 25 touches a game. But you're not drafting Gainwell to be that. What you're drafting him for is his receiving game capability, which we can get into later on with the profile when we're looking at his production coming out of Memphis. Now, if we go over to the athletic profile, here I know everybody wants to talk about Gainwell being some fantastic athlete, but if you look at his size-adjusted athleticism, it's actually in the 51st percentile, which pretty much makes him an average running back when it comes to athleticism. And I know a lot of people just want to look at straight 40-yard dash times because it's easily absorbed data, but what you would rather do is you'd rather size adjust it. That way the players like Derrick Henry, the players like A.J. Dillon, they kind of get a boost because you're not going to be expecting them to be on the same playing field as the Kenny Gainwell in terms of the touches that they are going to be seeing on the field. Okay. Now let's get over to the production, which, like I said, isn't everything at the running back position, but it is going to be important to talk about. So in 2018, he literally had no production in the slightest, but you can't blame him here at all. I mean, he was in a running back backfield that had Darrell Henderson and Tony Pollard, both running backs that have shown success when they've received opportunity at the NFL level. Now in 2019, this is when he had the full-on breakout. This is when you saw him have that dynamic ability where he averaged over 16 carries a game, over 3.5 receptions. That's what I want to point out here. Over 3.5 receptions in his sophomore season and closing in on almost 150 total yards a game. Now, I also want to point out he was playing on the same team this year as Antonio Gibson, and no, Antonio Gibson was not used as a traditional running back in college, but it is noteworthy to say that the coaching staff was looking at both Gibson and Kenny Gainwell, and they went, you know what? Gainwell is our starting running back here. Antonio Gibson, you can be a little bit more of a gadget player, but Gainwell is going to be the guy that we are getting way more touches in this offense. So I want to point that out, and this is coming from someone who loved Antonio Gibson, and Gainwell isn't nearly the type of athlete. He's not nearly the type of running back that Antonio Gibson is, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows that Gibson was on the same roster and Kenneth Gainwell was able to get this type of volume specifically in the receiving game. Now, in 2020, he didn't provide you with any type of production in the slightest because COVID, because everything that went along with that. So we can overlook that year. But coming into the NFL draft right now, if you look across consensus, I mean, pretty much everybody has Gainwell as a 3rd to 4th round NFL draft pick. A lot of people have him in the early 3rd. Some people have him in the early 4th. So I think we can safely say that he is going to be in that range where he's going to be a mid-second, maybe a compensatory 2nd round pick. I'm sorry, 3rd round pick in the NFL draft, similar to what you had Darrington Evans last year, similar to what you had with Alexander Madison a few years back. But here, please, guys, look at Gainwell and go, okay, this is not a running back that's close to an athlete of a DeAndre Swift. He's not close to an athlete of an Antonio Gibson. but he can catch passes. He has adequate size. He has adequate athleticism. So no, he doesn't have the elite ceiling. He doesn't come close to a Javonte Williams, to a Travis Etienne, to a Najee Harris, but he does have a profile that's going to make them stand out once we get past that tier. Okay, so now let's go to our next running back, someone that I just had to drop down the rookie rankings over on Patreon, and it definitely hurt doing so. I actually had to move some tight ends ahead of him. But Chuba Hubbard, okay, so Chuba Hubbard here, guys, I just don't understand it. Okay, so if you go back to last offseason, Chuba Hubbard was actually a running back that was a favorite to win the Heisman. He was like top 3 in Heisman odds coming into 2020. Now, if he would have came out in last year's NFL draft, he would have got the draft capital. He would have been getting paid millions of dollars right now. He would have been in that same tier as a Jonathan Taylor, as a J.K. Dobbins, as a Cam Akers. That's exactly where Chuba Hubbard was. Now, if I pull up a tweet that I had from last year, hopefully I'm not lazy, and I actually put it in this video. I sent out a tweet last year saying, hey, if Chuba Hubbard was in this draft class, where would you have him ranked? And a lot of people were coming out and said, hey, he'd be running back 1. He'd be running back 2. Everybody was in on Chuba Hubbard, and everything fell apart. So if we go through his profile, I mean, he was a 3-star guy coming out of high school. He's 22 years old coming into the NFL. You don't like to see either one of those things. Now, what you really don't like to see is you do not like to see the fact that he is 6 foot, 208 pounds. Now, that is not the size profile you're looking for. I know he weighs a little bit more than a running back that we just talked about in Gainwell, but the 4 inches makes a difference. That considerably drops down his BMI to a point where really no bell cow running backs in the NFL have a BMI close to this. It's Devontae Smith level worrisome. Now, what's even more worrisome, though, for Chuba Hubbard is one of the reasons that we were excited about him in this running back 2 tier is he was a track star. People were so excited projecting him to be one of the fastest running backs in this entire draft class. And for whatever reason, he goes to his pro day. He runs a 4.56. This gives him a 50th percentile speed score. I don't understand this at all. He was sold to be this elite level athlete. He showed that his sophomore year at Oklahoma State, and he comes out to his pro day and just completely drops the bag. Now, let's go through what he actually did at Oklahoma State, because this is the number one thing that is kind of keeping him a little bit afloat in these rankings and not just completely having him fall as a rock. But in 2018, he averaged 9.5 carries a game, almost 2 receptions, and he averaged 74 total yards. So obviously you like to see those numbers. In 2019, now this is the year where he had the breakout. 2019, 25 carries a game, over a reception and a half a game, and 176 yards with 21 touchdowns. Now, this is the year that had everybody all in on Chuba Hubbard. This is the year that had him as a top 5 Heisman favorite for the following season. Yet, obviously, we understand that things happen with him and his coach in the offseason of 2020. Then coming into the year, really, it's just not the same running back. It's not the same running back that we saw the year prior, where he only averages 19 carries a game. He averages less than 1 reception. More importantly, the yards go under 100 a game. So you don't want to see that from a running back that's in his red shirt junior season. That is a very bad mark, especially when we had high hopes coming into the NFL. Now, another thing that is going to be a red mark on this profile is the fact that pretty much consensus has it that he's going to be a day 3 NFL draft pick. So with Chuba Hubbard, it's sad to say, but the likelihood of him becoming an impact player just isn't that high. And I wanted to get excited. I wanted to rank him highly. I wanted to be higher on him than consensus, but the offseason has been absolutely atrocious for him. Now, he is going to be a little bit higher than some other running backs with this athletic profile, some other running backs with this size, and with the last round draft capital concerns. But that's just because that 2019 season. It's just because it's going to be so hard to get that out of my mind. Okay, so now let's get to our last running back we are going to be talking about here, and this is going to be Michael Carter Jr. Okay, another 3-star prospect coming out of high school. Another guy, 22 years old, and pretty much the exact same size as Kenneth Gainwell. Now, if we go over to his athleticism, this is why I'm going to be significantly lower on Michael Carter Jr. than most people. He ran a 4.59 40-yard dash. You combine this with his size, it's a 29th percentile speed score. Simply, you just don't see successful NFL running backs having this poor of size-adjusted athleticism. So please understand, guys, that right now, yes, Michael Carter Jr. is getting some hype, but I think it's mainly just due to that UNC offense. I think Sam Howell really is propping up all of these players, and if we get into his production, really, it's not that great. 2017, his true freshman season, averages less than 9 carries a game, averages a reception a game, which is something we want to point out, for a little bit less than 60 yards a game. Now in 2018, same mark, 9.3 carries a game. But the one thing that jumps up, and the one thing that we can get excited about, is the fact that he goes to 2.7 receptions, 81 total yards. Now in 2019, you have 13.5 carries a game, a reception and a half, 89 total yards. And in 2020, you have another jump up. But I want to remind everyone, guys, please understand that Sam Howell was a major difference maker in this offense. Sam Howell is going to be the #1 draft pick in the NFL draft next year. He's a fantastic quarterback, and I think that he propped up the offense to the point where Michael Carter Jr. was able to have this kind of success, averaging 14 carries a game, close to 2.5 receptions, and 137 total yards. Now, keep in mind, he's also a true senior whenever he has this production, so that's also something you don't want to see. And of course, everybody knows by now that he's playing alongside Javonte Williams those last 2 seasons, so that's something that you need to take into account. Obviously, the production would be higher if Javonte Williams wasn't there, but because Michael Carter Jr. simply is not going to get first or second round NFL draft capital, and he has very bad size adjusted athleticism, we're looking at him going, what is the upside here? I truly think that the upside with Michael Carter Jr. is honestly probably a Devin Singletary type player. Y'all know I hated Devin Singletary coming into the NFL as well because, like Michael Carter Jr., he was an undersized running back that wasn't that athletic. So I don't care what the film grinders are trying to tell us when the profile just simply points to a running back that does not have an access to an elite ceiling. Okay, so overall, guys, if we need to rank these running backs, how we currently have it over on Patreon is we actually have Gainwell just completely in a tier of his own. He's like 3 or 4 spots higher in the overall rankings than these other 2 guys. May actually be a little bit higher than that. And right now, we have Hubbard and we have Michael Carter Jr. neck and neck. Surprisingly, we actually have Chuba Hubbard 1 spot higher, but I want to let everyone know that when we create those rankings, we aren't going, okay, what running back has the highest floor? What running back has the highest floor coming in? Because when you draft someone in the late 2nd, early 3rd round, you're not going to be looking for someone to come in and be a low-end running back too. That's not what you want. You go, okay, this running back is going to bust 90% of the time. Very rarely do we see impact running backs coming in to Dynasty from that late 2nd, early 3rd round. But what you want to chase is you want to chase those running backs that have access to that elite level upside. This is why last offseason, the guys we were drafting there, A.J. Dillon and Antonio Gibson, over and over and over again, because we believe they have that elite level upside. And here with Chuba Hubbard, I think you can paint a picture just going, hey, maybe his mind wasn't in football the past 12 months. Maybe he gets drafted, has a change of heart, and he decides to completely devote his time to his game. Because if that happens, I think that his upside is just going to be a lot higher than someone like Michael Carter Jr. because I still want to believe that if he is trained properly, if he is coming out here doing everything he can, he is an above average athlete, and we've seen the elite production before. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And yeah, that's it. I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.